let's talk for and about the LGBT communities around the world. I'm Michael Ross, and this is Straight Friendly. Wow, this episode is so difficult to produce, Jonathan, isn't it?
Oh my God, this is crazy.
I had crazy idea, but
we just entered the rabbit hole and we can't leave.
We went in a laboratory of technology and computer sciences and all that, and I think we lost a bit.
Yeah, my mind is not technical in any way.
But you all have to see the amount of research that Jonathan has done here. The table is full of pages of research.
I think I'm able to have a PhD in AI, and I have no idea what that is.
Well, until a week ago, you had no idea at all what it means.
Well, now I have 0.0001% of knowledge.
So let us explain what is AI. Why are we doing this episode about? So a few months ago, I saw some article which was written by some scholar, which I really appreciate. And he was explaining there that today there is a technology in which televisions that has camera built inside of these televisions, they can recognize the people who are sitting in the living room watching the television. They can recognize their sexuality by the way the eyes move or blink, or, by the reactions of the body. Let's say if a man, if he see two guys kissing, does he like it or not, and all that. So, it's crazy, isn't it?
No, this is complete craziness.
Now, I love talking many times about the way technology affected the LGBT communities. Mm-hmm. I mean, like since the dating apps such as Grindr, Scruff, and so on, many people say that since using those apps, our socialization skills have completely changed, and we see less and less bars that are working and places where people can meet.
Yeah, everything is now online.
Yeah, and it's affecting us. And for me, it was really interesting that we will produce a podcast, an episode that will talk kind of about the current situations and the future. Mm-hmm. So imagine that radar, and we're going back forward to the future. So in this episode, we had to learn what machine learning means and AI, which stands for artificial intelligence. And we brought two amazing people for this episode. The first one is Professor Kobi Gal, who's going to explain us what technologies there are these days. For instance, in one of the research that you have been reading about, you found something like that some machines can recognize gender, right?
Yeah,
and something doesn't fit the people?
Exactly. So one of the issues that is being raised today around the world and in Europe is about technology that recognizes the gender of the person who is sitting in front of that technology. And sometimes this technology doesn't recognize transgender people, or they mislabel them or assume their gender. And this is a thing that got many people to ask themselves a lot of questions about whether a technology should try and assume your gender, and by that they could follow you or try to target you with different ads that is not relevant to your gender or what you feel.
Crazy. So like this all machines things, like this AI thing, it's like technology which is learning. It has its own kind of thinking. You know? Intelligence. Wow.
So I don't know what's going to happen in a few years.
Well, so in this episode, after talking with Professor Gal and understanding what are the technological capabilities these days, and of course, there are many benefits for that, but also lots of ethical questions that we should ask ourselves. And then we're going to talk with Yuri about legislation, which might happen very soon, actually, in Europe and also in some countries. So, like, this episode is so much like, I feel like in Star Wars. So, I never really watched it. I tried once, but really.
Yeah.
Oh my God, we're so gay. So, let's start with the episode. The production of this episode came to reality thanks to the support of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom in Jerusalem. And also thanks to our team, our production assistant, Jonathan Elkhoury, Sharon Agri, and our sound editor, Zach Aviad. He received his PhD in computer science from Harvard University. He studies the design of AI technologies for addressing real-world problems in such domains as education, governance, and negotiation. Please welcome Professor Kobi Gal. Hello, hello.
Hello, Michael. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for being with us, Professor. It's a bit strange for me, to call you professor, because we know each other through the gay sports group that we are in, and we were really lucky to, and the way we got to know each other was through celebrating the Eurovision Song Contest in one of the events of the sports group, and we had a very interesting conversation. And I think it was a year or 2 years ago, something like that. And recently, I was telling Jonathan that I really want to produce an episode where we will talk about AI, machine learning, all these computer science things that I don't know that much about. And maybe some of our listeners, probably many of them don't know what it means, but it's okay because you're going to help us to understand what AI means, what are the technologies which are happening these days. And later we will talk also later in our episode about the way it can affect LGBT communities around the world. But Professor, can you please, before we'll dive into the ethics behind the current technologies, can you please explain us what AI is? Why everyone are talking about it? It feels like this is the thing to talk about in the tech industry and the academic world about technology. So what's this AI thing?
Yeah, so isn't it amazing that something that on the one hand is so prevalent in our lives and we use it all the time. And on the other hand, there's such a discourse about, hey, what the heck is it, artificial intelligence? And what are the advantages and what are the challenges? And the greatest answer I can give you is that each person has his or her own definition or working definition of what artificial intelligence is. There's no one right answer. I can tell you that for me, the idea behind artificial intelligence is a piece of technology that builds machines, could be robots, it could be software, could even be a bank, an automatic bank teller that behaves in a way that I would perceive to be rational.
What happens today in so many places, right? It's not just about talking about technologies and things which are happening maybe in universities or stuff. These technologies, we are facing them on daily basis. We see so many changes, right? And
definitely.
So what's the big idea behind?
The big idea behind AI is it has to be a computer that exhibits some form of autonomy, so that the computer gets to make actual decisions and behavior in the world that we would perceive to be intelligent. That's why it's called artificial intelligence. So, for example, your remote control is not an AI because it's not autonomous, right? The only way it operates is if Michael gives a command to the remote control. Whereas Siri, or a tool for recommending and personalizing songs on YouTube, could be perceived to be rational because it's trying to adapt the most beneficial song for Michael's current interests. And the big advancement behind this particular technology that you are referring to is the ability to learn from data. So I would say that there are two focal points or two elementary changes that have occurred in the last years that have made AI become so big and so prevalent in our lives. And one is the fact that there's more and more data of our interactions in this world that is online and that is easy to access. So from the moment you get up until the moment you go to bed, just think about it. You're generating gigabytes of data, whether searching for the best route to go to work, whether for ordering your food over lunch, and whether you're going on a dating app to seek a partner. And then on the other hand, there's a development in smart algorithms that are able to take this data, analyze it, and reach conclusions. So this is, for example, why when you go on Waze in the morning, it already knows that you're probably about to go to work because it's doing some inference based on patterns of behavior that it's seen you doing in the past and other people like you that get up in the morning and probably go to work. So it's combining data with the ability to reason about the data to reach decisions. And then it's making decisions to try to affect your own behavior over time in a way that benefits the people that created the piece of software that you're using.
So, Professor Gal, is there any concerns in the academy about the use that could be used by AI? So, for example, using it in a bad way to detect if a person is going to go to this way and then harm them in any way?
So the first thing I'd like to say, and so thanks for the question. Of course, whenever there's a new piece of technology arising, people are thinking there are those who would seek to question its benefit and also suppose and point out that there are dangers. And I definitely agree. But I'm not one of those people who think that AI is purely something to be weary about and to be completely afraid of. I think that artificial intelligence is a marvelous thing because it brings us closer together and it helps us become better people. It can help people cooperate. I mean, that's my own vision for artificial intelligence as a tool that can help us reach agreements, for example, on the negotiation table rather than in the battlefront. And you're also correct that just like any other technology, there's the ability to use AI not only for the good, but also for the bad. And I would claim that there are three challenges that make AI particularly vulnerable to misuse. And we need to adhere to these challenges. So the first problem with AI is that a lot of the times the applications don't include all of the different kinds of people that are ending up using this application, right? And definitely in terms, if you think of the GLBTQ community, a lot of times people complain, for example, that they're on a dating app and they don't see their preferences well considered in their user dashboard. Another challenge is that AI can lead to deception and exploitation. So a famous example are there was everyone knows Uber, right? You use it. You can use it to hail rides, and anyone can be an Uber driver, and it's great, right? Because if I'm late, I don't have to take a cab. I can just take my Uber app. And I can even join a shared ride and maybe meet someone interesting in the cab. And what Uber does is it uses intelligent algorithms to predict when their drivers are about to go home. And then occasionally it offers them a benefit, like a few more dollars, to stay and continue to drive for another hour or two. When you think about it, this uses artificial intelligence in a way that I would say exploits person power, because on the one hand, you're trying to change someone's behavior, and on the other hand, that behavior might lead to safety issues on the road. I mean, just think about it. Someone very tired who wants to go home and rest is actually being coerced and deceived, I wouldn't say deceived, but exploited into staying longer on the road. So avoiding exploitation or deception, that's a big problem. And if you think about it, these challenges come about because AI is a very special technology. It's so flexible and it's so adaptable to the way to the way people behave, that it brings about these issues in a way that is more pronounced than other pieces of technology. So the last challenge that I think is very important to mention with respect to AI being used for this benefit is the fact that we need to prevent unanticipated usage of algorithms. So, for example, there's a lot of talk now about governments using face recognition software that has reached quite amazing performance to spot out people in demonstrations and possibly arrest them. A few years ago, there was an algorithm released and even reported in a scientific journal, heaven forbid, that claimed to be able to recognize LGBT people from pictures. So it claimed to be able to use to predict what gender and what sexual orientation you were, just based on facial features. Now, just disregarding the obvious critique that, based on such physical appearance, one could connect an entire set of preferences, gender, and attraction. Think of a government that is trying to haul in their LGBT community using software like this. So, again, the three challenges I think are that the design is not inclusive to all of their users, that the software could be used to exploit, and that it might be used in the ways that researchers did not intend originally.
So in these days, this data can be used both by governments, but also by private companies, correct?
It's true, yeah. Yeah, because a lot of the technology is developed in a university and is open source. So, for example, in my lab, we try to use intelligent nudges to get people to be more productive when they work together in a group. So that group could be students in a forum, or it could be volunteers trying to help science. And we use AI technology, for example, to understand when students lose motivation on the site. So it's enough to look, for example, on the lags between their clicks to try to guess whether a student is facing a difficult question, or has had enough, or is getting bored. And you do this with intelligent algorithms, but you could also use the same piece of technology in a bad way, right? By getting people who work in government agencies or in call centers, for example, to be more productive than they would have. And I think, again, that's one of the dangers of using AI technology in such a way, is you're changing people's behavior. That's the big change about AI when you compare it to other pieces of technology. It's an intervention in society that is going to affect the way people behave, whether for the short term or the long term. I would even say it's
both
even
as
more
individuals
amazing.
and also as societies.
And also societies, right? Because when we act as a group, then we get to be in a society. Exactly. And if you alter the behavior of individuals, then you're affecting the behavior of the complete society. And when you think about it, you're by intervening in the way people interact, AI has the potential of creating behavioral changes that could benefit some, but not others. And, this happens today, right? I mean, each one of us has about 30, 40 active apps on their cell phones none of these apps really care about Michael the person and want to benefit Michael. They really care about benefiting the people who created those apps, and they're trying to keep Michael engaged and alarmed and active within those apps, making money for the people who design them. And that's a very bad thing if you think about it. Life shouldn't be this way.
But also other kind of apps which are there's not necessarily AI behind them. They also affected us and the way we behave. For instance, dating apps within the LGBT communities, they've affected not only the way we behave, but the whole socialization skills. They even affected the economies about that. So what's the difference between, like AI can be just as any other tool, or it's more dangerous because like through the machine learning, it can, like maybe we cannot stop it. And like a dating app which is
so I think
being coded and
so I think you hit the nail on the head, and the metaphor that comes to mind is you remember this Walt Disney movie, The Sorcerer's Apprentice, where he doesn't want to work. Mickey Mouse doesn't want to work, so he invents this magic broom that brings in water for him, but then he falls asleep and he doesn't know how to stop the magic broom. And so, of course, there are benefits to using AI, and indeed, a lot of the benefits is a direct consequence of making all of this data available from millions and millions of people all around the world, providing patterns of behavior. And just think about it, every mouse click and every swipe of your finger on the cell phone is being recorded and analyzed. And that's very powerful. You can do a lot of good things with it. I'm not saying you don't. It's great to be able to be matched up with a person who might share a lot of my preferences and who happens to live in Iceland, and I would never get together with that person and interact with him or her if it weren't for this recommendation algorithm. And it's wonderful to be able to have recently like a cognitive behavioral therapy support over the internet that uses AI to try to get you to change behavior and help you cope with insomnia or stress by understanding what your issues are and by adapting some helpful clinical material. But at the same level, the fact that this data can be collected by different organizations and is often misused is very dangerous. And we see time and again all of these scandals that have to do with the way data is protected and leaked on the internet, and also used in ways that we might not have anticipated. Again, this is one of the challenges that I referred to. There was an infamous experiment, for example, by Facebook, where they tried to see if they could control people's moods by manipulating their feeds. And so they did A/B testing on their site using thousands and thousands of people without telling them in advance that they would be participating in this grand experiment. And one cohort of people were exposed to feeds providing news that had providing good news, and one cohort of people were exposed to feed providing bad news. And then they were looking to see the effect of that on the kind of posts people create, what kind of sentiment is affected in the post. And if you think about it, that's a very dangerous kind of experiment to make. And if you wanted to do that experiment in a university psychology department, you would need to undergo very strict ethical review and probably would not even be allowed to run this experiment. But Facebook just ran it because they could, and because they have all of these people addicted to their site and who are going to log on and could be used as cannon fodder for this experiment. And again, I think that's very dangerous when you have big organizations that have access to all of these data and all of these users, and they're not regulated.
So, Professor Gal, you mentioned earlier the usage of some sort of an AI gaydar and the research that they did in Cambridge and the backlash that happened afterwards. And we have a lot of examples from around the world of different apps that uses what's called inside of AI AGR, the automated gender recognition. And there's a lot of concerns throughout the world that people don't want a machine to assume their gender. Or, for example, the concern is mainly about transgender people. They're concerned that an app could misrepresent them or could target them in ways that they don't want to. And today in Europe, in the European Parliament, for example, there's a try to make a legislation to prevent the usage of the automated gender recognition, because in their way it could harm a lot of people and misrepresent them. And we're going to talk about with Dr. Yuri about it after we finish the conversation with you. So I wanted to ask you, if not in a legislation way, how could we try and prevent this from harming or misrepresenting or misgendering people from the LGBTQ community?
Well, so that's a great question. And before I answer it, let's think about why is there so many examples of misuse of AI that has a bad effect on us users. It's because it's so easy to write an algorithm that can exploit the sheer amount of data and possibly lead to exploitation. Compare it to, say, another piece of technology that is very beneficial but also has a lot of ethical issues, like stem cell research. When you think about it, there's legislation in some countries, but not in others, about cloning human embryo. You don't see a lot of it happening just because it's very, very difficult to do. But AI, on the other hand, is so easy, right? All you need is a piece of code, software, and there's a lot of algorithms out there, just as I mentioned before, that's open source and freely available. And so that's why the ethical issue is so important and so pronounced today. And like you mentioned, Jonathan, there's more and more legislative work about imposing regulations and laws that attempt to standardize the way people should behave when creating artificial intelligence, whether scientists or whether people on the ground. An example that I'd like to mention is the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, that is all about what kind of rights should users have protected when they use a piece of software that collects data about them. A very interesting piece of regulation is called the right to be forgotten. And that means that any person can fill out an online form. You can just Google this and fill this form online, where you can complain that a piece of information about you that is no longer relevant to society is floating out there on the web and can potentially harm you. And there are people who go over, humans, experts, who go over these forms and decide whether to remove information about yourself from the internet. So that could be, for example, someone in Germany who was convicted of a crime 30 years ago, and after he got released from jail, found it very difficult to get a job because people were looking him up when he was going to interviews. So Google changed their search engine, that is, they changed their AI in order to forget that possible piece of information. And on the other hand, beyond legislation, there's a lot of stuff that we, the user community, can be doing differently to encourage the designers of artificial intelligence to be more aware of our ethical rights. And in order to make those decisions, we have to be responsible about the kind of apps we download and the kind of apps we use. We have to make a sacrifice for not using a piece of software that doesn't come with a guarantee about how they're using our data. We have to be more alert towards what are companies doing with our data, how are they using it, and what are they presenting to others with respect to this processing. So this is called transparency. How transparent the company is with respect to our data should be a common part. It should be part and parcel of an app. So the way I see it, in a perfect world, when I download an app, it should explain to me in very clear terms how it collects data, what it uses this data for, and give me some guarantee. And then it's up to me, Kobi, to decide whether or not I want to keep using that app after having understood and digested all of this information. So it requires, of course, some investment of time, of knowledge, but I think we have to get there in order to make the right choices and avoid situations that I spoke about earlier, where we are just being exploited by these various companies. So, we need to be able to make a sacrifice, not to use a piece of software, just like people started boycotting WhatsApp back in the day because they didn't have a secure communication line. Well, we should be willing to boycott other pieces of other apps that have loose standards with respect to ethics, and we should be willing to make a sacrifice about it. So that's a big ask for a lot of people, I know, but it has to come from us as well as the legislation.
What an amazing conversation we just had with Kobi.
Wow, I think Professor Gal is one of the specialists that really understands this subject.
You did some good homework, Jonathan. He was quite impressed. So we're moving to our next scholar. Also a very, very, very nice person. He is a senior campaigner at All Out, based in Italy. He has been leading All Out's work against the anti-gay crackdown in Chechnya, including being detained in Moscow with local activists as they tried to deliver 2 million petition signatures to Russian authorities. He is also a secretary of LGBTI Liberals of Europe. Please welcome, I'm so honored, Yuri Guayana. Really good to have you here. We wanted to host you for quite a long time. We had several discussions before recording finally, so thanks a lot for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm really honored.
And Jonathan is with us here, and we've been talking with Professor Kobi Gal a lot about what is the current situation, what are the current technologies and the ethics behind them, the good and the bad about that. And we started just a bit to talk about how can we deal with the situation. And Yuri, as an activist, I think that you can really tell us what is happening these days. I mean, in many countries, still there is no legislation related to the technological changes that can affect different communities, and especially the LGBTI plus communities. So we would love to hear your perspective about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I think what is happening right now is that we have very quick technological development, and the legal systems around the world cannot keep up with it. Some contexts are trying to keep up with it, but in most cases, it's not happening. And this creates some problems, some human rights problems, especially for minority groups like the LGBT plus community. To give you an example of what I mean by that is, artificial intelligence. We're talking about that today. And within artificial intelligence, which is a very complex set of technologies, and just I want to say that upfront, I am a huge fan and supporter of technological development and scientific development. So I'm not against artificial intelligence by any means, but within that big realm of technological development, there are some technologies that can create problems for minority groups if they are not regulated properly. And to give you an example, if we think of what is happening around the world nowadays around automated recognition of gender and potentially even sexual orientation, we can see that this technology is used for all sorts of things right now. For instance, in airports or in subway lines or on apps or in some businesses like, driving cars or services like Uber, or in the platforms that are delivering us some music to listen to. And in those contexts, basically there is this piece of technology that is trying to understand what gender identity we hold and what sexual orientation we hold, especially about gender identity. The mechanism is that they, with facial recognition, with, analyzing the way we talk, the way we move, this technology is assuming our gender identity. And I use the word assuming because it's not 100% accurate. It's just an assumption based on the looks, and that creates problems in one sense. For instance, there are cases where drivers at Uber are required to scan their faces and their documents with their ID, with the photos, for very good reasons, to guarantee the safety of people that are using the service. But among the things that the scan is actually detecting from the photo is the gender identity of the person. And if, let's say that a driver is a trans person, and in the process of transitioning, maybe the photos doesn't really match anymore the feature of the face, the photo on the ID, the new feature of the face that is changing during the transition. And that may end up blocking the person from working on that particular day or even more than one day because there is no match, and therefore the system cannot assess the safety of the driver. And that has very concrete consequences for the person, right? Then there are other circumstances in which the companies are trying to administer to people certain content that is based on their gender identity. For instance, in Sao Paulo, Brazil, in the subway, there are advertisements and commercials that are delivered to people according to what cameras in the system are assuming the gender identity is, which means that assumed males are administered some content, let's say a drill, and females are administered some other contents, let's say a doll. Now, this has all sorts of problems. First of all, people are separated into two different groups without knowing it or without giving an explicit consent. Secondly, this technology and this system is reinforcing stereotypes, gender stereotypes. So that doesn't really affect only LGBT plus people, but it affects even men and women. Why a man has to be interested in certain products that some AI system, some algorithm is deciding for, and some other people, based on being women, should be interested in other things. So this goes back to reinforcing very old-fashioned stereotypes, gender stereotypes.
So Yuri, after discovering the problem, your organization, you're the Secretary General for the LGBTI Liberals for Europe, and your organization has adopted some sort of regulations proposal, and they're trying now to advocate it in the EU Parliament, and are trying to maybe change the way that the ADH, the AGR is used today. Can you take us through the steps of the reason to do that on a maybe governmental level and not only on a personal level?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So in December last year, LGBT liberals of Europe adopted a resolution during the General Assembly that is basically taking on a resolution that was already adopted by ALDE party, which is the Liberal Party at the European Union level. And the reason why this is happening and we are focusing on the European Union is because last year, in April, like just basically...
in April of 2020.
Yes, in April 2021, the European Union, the European Commission started a process to deliver a new directive, that's what they call it, which is basically a new piece of legislation. They presented a bill, and this bill is aiming at regulating artificial intelligence in general. And that is a very important moment for us in Europe, and I would say for around the world, to try and insert some strict regulation on AGSR as well, as automated recognition of gender and sexual orientation. And what we are advocating for is to actually include a ban on this piece of technology. So it's not a ban on artificial intelligence per se, of course, it's a ban on this specific technology. The process, like the legislative process in the European Union, is very complicated. It takes a lot of time. Basically, the end of this process will probably happen in towards September, October, November 2022. When there will be the final vote. And so now there is a lot of time to actually try and lobby to insert this ban. And as a matter of fact, if the European Commission proposal doesn't have that, the European Data Protection Board has issued an opinion about this regulation, saying that a general ban on any use of artificial intelligence for an automated recognition of human features in publicly accessible spaces should be banned. And that include automated recognition of gender and sexual orientation.
So we're basically talking about airports or any other places that could recognize you by your facial...
Absolutely. Airports, public spaces like squares during rallies. It can be, as I said before, subway stations. It can be any places that are accessible to people, even bars or restaurants, you know. And that is good. So why are we asking for a ban of this piece of technology? The reason is because of the harm that this could cause to some people, because of the reinforcement of stereotypes, as I said before, because of the potential harm that this might cause in authoritarian states, if you think of sexual orientation, and also because this is definitely an opportunity for the European Union to give an example to the rest of the world on how technological development and artificial intelligence can go hand in hand with human rights. And in this, if the European Union bans it, it means that the European Union will not be able to export the technology to other countries. So that's the reason why we're focusing on the European Union as well. It could have an impact on the rest of the world. It happened before with GDPR, which is the regulation around privacy. The European Union was one of the first, actually it was the first bloc that regulated that. And now other countries like Brazil, India are actually thinking of moving in that direction, and they're moving forward with it. And then the responsibility, of course, of exporting technology that might be, okay in certain contexts, but very dangerous in other contexts is definitely important. And the third and last thing that I wanted to say in terms of why are we doing that is that the redeeming value for society of this specific part of the technology is really hard to grasp, right? Because why do we need to use automatic recognition for administer certain content to certain people? What's the purpose of it? What's the good in it? Why do we need to do that for airports? There is another example, like for instance, Spotify patented a while ago a system to recognize through your voice the gender, your gender. So, and that was used to try and serve music that might be more aligned to the taste assumed on a gender based. But why? Why do we need that? Especially for platforms that know what music we're listening to, and they can base their very good services on what we actually listen to without inserting the gender, the gender stereotype into it.
So as I read about, for example, the example that you gave about Spotify, eventually they kind of went back from their decision to develop this type of technology because of a rise of a lot of people who said that this thing shouldn't happen. So that leads me eventually to a different question that I wanted to ask. After we kind of based at the beginning of our conversation that governments are really lacking back in the advancement of the technologies that are we having today, and the way that the fast way that they're moving in. So you mentioned that it might take years to develop some sort of legislation against it. So how can we do something that is more of a maybe an instant call for action?
Yeah, so I think the best way to take action on that is actually trying to pressure governments, and especially the European Union, which is the only government that started a process on this through social pressure. There is a campaign out there that was started by All Out and Access Now, and it also Reclaim Your Face, and it's directed to the European Union institution, the Commission, the Parliament, and the Council, and it's asking exactly that, to ban automatic recognition of gender and sexual orientation. I think that is a very good way to make your voice heard, and to participate into that and to sign this petition, you can just go on the All Out website. It's www.allout.org. It's in multiple languages: English, Spanish, Italian, you name it, and you can sign it.
So we gave a lot of examples about the usage of AI, and in particularly the AGR, the automated gender recognition system that you're working to ban in the EU. Do we have any direct examples of people who were hurt by these type of technologies?
So we have. So there is a research out there that I think it was a research that was carried out in 2018 that actually asked some trans and non-conforming people what they think about this technology, because this technology has been around for quite a while, and it's very interesting to see what trans and non-conforming people think about it, because they are certainly the most affected people right now. And just to give you another example before going to what they think about it, some extraction from this research, I can mention another example that really shows how, I can actually mention a couple of other examples that really shows how trans people might be affected by this technology. One is an app that is women only. And this app uses artificial intelligence and automated recognition of gender to assess whether the person wanting to use that app is a woman or not. And it has happened that trans women were not recognized as women. And that caused, of course, a lot of trouble. Of course, trans women can connect directly with the people in the app, and they can try to explain and go through some process. But that doesn't take away the fact that they need to go through some additional steps to confirm their identity, which is humiliating, and in some cases that it's also very troubling. Another example that is happening in Europe, in Berlin. I think it was in 2019 or 2018, not sure. When for Women's Day, March the 8th, the subway system decided to give free tickets to women. And the way to do it was to use automatic recognition of genders at the machines for selling tickets. And, if the camera and the algorithm decided that you were a woman, you could have the free ticket. But trans women faced some problems. Sometimes they weren't recognized as women. Again, they could go to the person and explain and show their ID and etc. And then, of course, they would get the free ticket. But they had to go through that process, showing IDs. That is obviously very painful for trans women, some trans people in general. Sometimes the ID doesn't really match the identity yet. So that's a very complicated, cumbersome process that is not helpful. So having said that, what do trans people think about automatic recognition of gender? And let me just give you some example. For instance, one trans non-conforming white person in the US, this research was carried out in the US, says automatic gender recognition is not just a trans issue, it is a misogyny and a patriarchy issue, because we have created these narrow boxes around policing male and policing female. This leads back to the example in Sao Paulo, for instance, where this technology can reinforce stereotypes. Another one, a non-binary white person still in the US. I get misgendered enough by human beings. Why on earth would I want a robot to help with that? Programmatic misgendering just adds to the ocean of constant small comments we all swim in. Misgendering is death by 1,000 paper cuts.
This is a really sensitive question, and I wanted to ask you that as one of the leading activists in many organizations, mainly in Europe and around the world. Do you think that because this technology could potentially harm transgenders and non-conformative people more than a typical gay or a lesbian, do you think that led to us not really hearing about it all the time?
No, I don't think so. Because actually this technology may affect gay and lesbians as well, quite a lot. Actually, let's cover that. Back in 2018, a research at Stanford University claimed that artificial intelligence could be very accurate in recognizing the sexual orientation of people. So it's not about gender identity, it's only sexual orientation. That research actually, that there was a huge debate, a huge controversy around the world, and that research resulted being very flawed. That wasn't particularly true, which is, by the way, the case for all these pieces of technology. It's like they claim that they can do stuff, but they are not really good at it.
So like you said, it was a sensation when it was about gays and lesbians and whether they can detect if we're gay or not. And the other kind of cases went down, they like not really heard about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can confirm that. Like even when we were trying to push the campaign at aloud, or even when we approved the resolution with LGBTI liberals of Europe, weirdly enough, media was interested in that, but it was mainly mainstream media or media that tackled technology. The LGBT, the regular mainstream LGBT plus media didn't pick it up. We tried, we pushed it, and it didn't pick it up. Why? What's the reason behind it? I think the reason behind it is that this is a very complicated topic. It's technology. I myself, when I started campaigning about it, had to study a lot, and it took me a lot of time. I think you went through the same, Jonathan.
I'm still going through the same.
Me too. I am by far no expert on the matter, and that also, I might, not know all of the complications in technology that this, in fears, but I approach this topic from the human rights framework, which is what I'm an expert on. And even so, I had to study because the intersection between the two is complicated. So it's very complicated. And I think the regular LGBT plus media outlet doesn't really have that on their radar. It's more the usual topic that we talk about in the movement: marriage equality, trans rights in general. This is more techy and complicated, and it's not out there yet that much. But it has very important consequences. If you ask me, this is one of the topical, it's like one of the very important topics that we need to tackle right now, because this technology is already there. As I said at the very beginning, the technology is already there. It's deployed. We might not see, very, very bad consequences right now, because, you can rightly say, well, okay, if I miss a plane because I'm stopped at the airport, it's bad. It's humiliating. It's everything, but it's not being killed. But, you never know when this technology is there, then different authorities, governments, but also companies can use it in bad ways. And if we don't have a solid human rights legal framework to make sure that the technology is developed in a way that is conforming the most important principles that, Illuminism, liberalism came up with, which is human rights. And that's why, as LGBTI liberals of Europe, we are very, very interested in that, because we're liberal. Then we might very easily shift from a liberal, like technological development that is at the service of individuals and is used to empower individuals to be even more active as citizens and even more active in a democratic context, into technology that is misused by authoritarian countries. And we have already been seeing this in China, for instance. Look at the use of technology that they do to repress rallies in Hong Kong, for instance, or in their own, like in mainland China. This is to me, this is really at the core of what the cleavage is going to be between liberal democracies and authoritarian states. And it's extremely important that we start operating now to make sure that technology is used in a liberal way, in a human rights conforming way, to empower the individual to become freer, more democratic, and more involved in active citizenship.
Wow. Thank you very much, Dr. Guayana. It's a lot of fascinating information and alerting and scary at the same time. So thank you very much for this conversation, and
thank you.
You keep up doing the amazing work that you're doing.
Thank you for having me.
This was another episode of Straight Friendly Global. You can find more episodes and listen to our podcast on your favorite listening app, such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Echo Podcasts, Alexa Media Player, Google Podcasts, and so on.